The great hall of the Red Keep smelled of smoke, not the faint, comforting scent of a hearth fire, but thick, oily smoke from charred wood and melted gold. Ned Stark stood alone in front of the Iron Throne, the jagged seat of kings, watching the flames climb its cruel spikes. The hall was empty. Everyone had fled when the shouting began. Outside, the streets of King's Landing roared with the restless noise of a city sensing something had shifted. Something had broken. Ned's hands were black with soot. The sword ice hung heavy at his side, but he had not drawn it. He hadn't needed steel to do this. Just oil, fire, and the weight of a choice he could never undo. It had taken only a few moments for the fire to catch. The dried rushes on the floor burned first, then the silk banners above. Flames licked the sides of the throne's iron spikes, heating them until they glowed red. The heat was unbearable already, but Ned stood there, rooted to the stone floor, feeling the enormity of what he'd done settle on his shoulders. The Iron Throne symbol of every war. Every lie, every betrayal was dying in front of him. He thought of Robert, bloated and drunk on his hunting chair, boasting of victories that were little more than butchery. He thought of Cersei's cold smile, her hands always folded just so, hiding secrets behind her eyes. He thought of the Targaryens before them, all the madness and fire they had brought, and of the long winter that would come for the North no matter who sat here. That was the truth no one wanted to face. No king or queen had ever truly ruled Westeros. The throne ruled them all. It devoured them slowly, cruelly, piece by piece. Now it would devour no one. The doors to the hall banged open, and a rush of cool air swept in. Sir Barristan Selmy stood there, sword in hand, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Lord Stark," he said, his voice breaking with outrage, "what in the name of the gods have you done?" Ned didn't look away from the fire. "What had to be done?" he answered. "You've destroyed the seat of the realm." Selmy strode forward, the flames painting his armor gold and crimson. "Do you know the chaos this will bring?" "Yes." Selmy stopped short, staring at him like he was seeing a stranger. "You've gone mad." "Mad?" Ned turned to him at last. "Mad is keeping this abomination standing, knowing what it costs us. Mad is letting our children grow up to fight wars over it. Mad is bowing to the steel that has bled this land for centuries." The flames roared higher, eating the last of the throne's silhouette. Melted metal dripped to the floor like black. Tears. Footsteps thundered from behind Selmy. Littlefinger appeared in the doorway, breathing hard, eyes glittering with something that might have been amusement or hunger. "Seven hells, Stark," he said lightly. "You've just handed the realm to chaos." "The realm was already in chaos," Ned replied. "Now it has no false god to kneel to." Littlefinger's smile was slow, predatory. "You think you've destroyed power? No, you've scattered it. And scattered power is the easiest kind to collect for the right man." Ned's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. He could already hear shouts in the corridors. By nightfall, the whole city would know. By morning, every lord in Westeros would be sharpening his ambition. Selmy turned toward the doorway. "We need to get the queen," he said sharply. And? "The king's children, they are not Robert's children," Ned said before he could stop himself. The words hit Selmy like a sword to the gut. Littlefinger's eyebrows rose. "So," Pettier murmured, "the wolf bares his teeth at last." The heat from the fire became unbearable, forcing them all back. The roof above the throne room groaned. The fire would soon take more than the throne. It would take the hall itself. Ned took one last look at the molten heap that had once ruled kingdoms. "It's done," he said quietly, more to himself than to them. "Let the realm choose its own path without this cursed seat guiding it." But in his heart he already knew destroying the throne might not free the realm. It might only unchain the wolves. The city boiled like a pot left too long over the fire. Word raced through the streets faster than any rider. People swore they had seen the pillar of smoke from every district, though most had only smelled it. By sunset, the story had a dozen versions. Some said Dragonfire had returned to the Red Keep. Some said the gods had struck down the seat of sin. Some said a northern wolf had gone mad and tried to burn the whole castle. No one knew the truth, only that the Iron Throne was gone, and the balance that held the city together had snapped. Ned moved through corridors that felt smaller than they had in the morning. The walls were close, stones sweating with heat, tapestries smoldering from drifting embers. He had sent for his household guard, but the Red Keep was a maze, and rumors were a better guide than maps. Twice he had to turn back as men-at-arms ran past with buckets and ladders, shouting orders no one heard. A boy with a split lip tried to warn him that the Queen had sealed her children in their chambers. Ned only nodded and kept walking. He reached the small council chamber and pushed in, without knocking. The room reeked of ink and stale wine. Varys sat alone at the table, hands folded like a priest's, face smooth as still water. One look at Ned told him enough. "So," the eunuch murmured, "the deed is done." "You already knew," Ned said. "I know when a palace sighs," Varys replied. "Tonight it screams. The flames you lit at the throne will burn in 10,000 imaginations before morning. Each mind will make them fit its own fear." Ned stood, feeling a headache build behind his eyes. "We need calm. We need the city watch to hold the gates and keep the streets quiet. I want every gold cloak sworn to stay their hand unless threatened. There will be no killings tonight." Varys looked almost sad. "You ask for quiet in a season of thunder. Still, I have sent words to certain captains who prefer peace to chaos. They will do what they can. But there is the Queen, and there is the boy, and there are men who live to serve their own storms. She will try to run," Ned said, "or worse, to strike first." "Both are possible." Varys rose. "You should not be here, my lord. There is a tide in this keep, and it does not love Northmen." Ned took a breath. "Send for Renly. Send for Stannis if you can find him. Send for the lords Tyrell and Redwine. Tell them the throne is gone, but the realm remains. We must choose a path together, not with steel." Varys tilted his head. "The realm rarely chooses without steel, but I will carry your words." When Ned left the council chamber, he found Sir Barristan waiting with 2 white-cloaked Kingsguard. The old knight's face was a map of lines, each one deeper than it had been an hour ago. He looked at Ned like a man measuring a chasm. "The Queen demands your presence," Selmy said. "She can demand from her chambers," Ned answered. "I will see her, but not as a supplicant." They walked without speaking. The keep seemed to lean toward them, doors half open, shadows bulging in the corners. They arrived at a heavy oak door, guarded by Lannister men. Inside, the air smelled of rose oil and fear. Cersei stood by the window, her profile hard as a coin's edge. Behind her, Tommen pressed his face into a pillow, shoulders shaking. Joffrey was nowhere in sight. "You ruined everything," Cersei said, not turning. "The one thing that kept beasts in cages, you turned to slag." "It was a cage for all of us," Ned said, "including your children." Now she faced him. Her eyes were green glass in firelight. "Spare me your northern honesty. You lit a match and called it a prayer. There will be war because of you." "There was always going to be war," Ned said. "Robert is dying, if he is not already dead. Your son would claim the throne. My letters would say he is not the heir, and men would fight. The throne only made it simple." She took a step closer, voice low. "And now it will be complicated and bloodier. You think removing the chair removes the game? It multiplies it. Every lord a king, every banner its own crown. Tell me, Stark, when the river lords and the lions and the roses all declare themselves guardians of the realm, which one will you kneel to?" "I don't kneel to lies," he said. "Then you will drown in them," she whispered back. "Joffrey is with the city watch. He speaks to them well. He promises them coin, meat, and glory. Do you?" Ned felt the floor tilt. He had ignored the boy because he couldn't bear to look at Robert's failure carved into a young face. That was an error with a golden sword. Cersei smiled, small and sharp. "You burned a thing. My son builds a story. Which is stronger?" "I'll speak to the watch," Ned said. "I'll make them understand there is no throne to guard." "They will find one," she said. "They always do." Selmy, who had kept quiet, cleared his throat. "My queen, the boy should be brought back to the castle. The streets are not safe. Joffrey is safest with men who love him," Cersei sighed, then flicked her gaze to Ned. "And with men who hate you. Leave, Stark, before I call the rest of the Kingsguard and make you." Ned held her eyes a heartbeat longer, then turned and left. In the corridor, Selmy touched his arm. "You should have guards." "I have my honor," Ned said. "It will not stop arrows," the old knight replied. "You have made an enemy of half the city and a jest of the other half. Go to your men. Go now. Now." Ned went. He found Jory Castle and 15 Northmen near the base of the Tower of the Hand, tired and smoky and ready to fight anything that breathed. When they saw him, relief softened their faces. They hurried him inside and to rooms that smelled like cold stone and leather oil. Arya had left a practice stick by the door, splintered and stubborn. Sansa's embroidery lay folded on a chair, the needle stuck half through, as if the girl had gone to fetch tea and would be back soon. Ned's chest clenched. "Pack lightly," he told Jory. "We may need to leave the city before dawn." Jory's jaw tightened. "South or north? Neither," Ned said. "Not yet. We hold the tower. We don't start fights. We end the ones that find us." Outside, bells began to ring. Not the thin bells of a sept, but the heavy iron tongues of alarm. Men shouted under the windows. Boots pounded on cobbles. Dogs went mad. Jory went to the slit and looked down, then sucked in. A breath. "Gold cloaks," he said. "A lot of them. And gods. Look at that." Ned stepped beside him. In the street, lanterns bobbed like fireflies on a black river. On a cart stood Joffrey Baratheon, hair bright as a new minted crown, voice slicing the night. He was talking to the watch the way a boy talks to hounds, loud and proud, promising the end of wolves and serpents both. Beside him, the commander of the watch, Janos Slint, stood with his hands folded on a fat belly, nodding as if he heard the gods. Ned could not catch the words, but he didn't need them. He knew promises when he saw them. He felt a brush of cold along his neck, the touch of winter finding skin. "Send 2 men to Barristan Selmy," he said. "Tell him the watch is being bought in the street. Tell him he is still a knight, and knights protect the people from riots disguised as justice. Will he listen?" Jory asked. "He is a man," Ned said. "He will listen to his own heart. Not mine, but we will try." The bells kept ringing. Torches kept moving. Somewhere far away, a woman screamed, short and sharp, then nothing. Ned sat at his table and wrote with a hand that would not stop shaking. He wrote to Robb in Winterfell. "Close the gates, call the banners, hold the neck." He wrote to Stannis on Dragonstone. "Come claim what is yours, if you dare claim it without a chair to sit on." He wrote to Renly, to Hoster Tully, to anyone whose sense of order might outweigh their hunger. When he finished, Jory returned with a face as gray as dawn. "The watch has sealed the mud gate and the king's gate," he said. "No one in or out without Slint's mark. And there are whispers the Red Keep's kitchens are feeding the gold cloaks to night roast and wine. They will eat well before they feed on us," Ned said. Jory nodded at the window. "There's one more thing. The small folk. They're choosing sides. Not the way lords choose, with banners, with bread and fear. Some cheer the boy, some pray for the queen. Some say the North set the fire, and the North should pay. A fish rots from the head, my lord, but the stink reaches the market first." Ned closed his eyes. He thought of the throne melting, the iron weeping. He thought of the look in Cersei's eyes, the glint in Littlefinger's, the careful concern on Varys's mask. He thought of Robert, off somewhere between life and death, leaving behind a mess that no sword could cut cleanly. He thought of winter, which did not care about gold cloaks or crowns. "Winter came for all, let them choose," he said softly. "We will not force them. We will hold fast and speak plain. If the city wants calm, we will be calm. If the city wants blood, then gods help us all." The door banged open. A breathless messenger stumbled in, cheeks raw from running. "My lord," he gasped. "From the Red Keep, the Queen declares. A council at first light. All lords and commanders to attend. She says the city must name a protector of the realm until matters are settled." Ned's mouth went dry. Protector. With no throne, the word was a glove looking for a hand. "Very well," he said. "We'll attend." Jory hesitated. "Do you trust it?" "No," Ned said. "But I trust what happens if we don't go even." "Less." He rose, feeling the weight of the night settle into his bones. He had set a fire to free the realm from one chain, and now a dozen new chains wound through the streets, bright as torchlight and twice as dangerous. He put on his cloak, fastened the clasp, and looked once more at his daughter's abandoned things. Then he blew out the candle and let the darkness come in dot by the time dawn crept over King's Landing. The city stank of smoke, sweat, and wet. Stone. The fires in the throne room had been beaten back in the night, but the damage was done. The roof above the hall sagged like a wounded beast, its ribs blackened and brittle. Ash lay in drifts along the courtyard stones, and the once proud banners of the realm hung in scorched tatters. Ned rode to the red keep under a sky the color of dull steel. His Northmen formed a tight knot around him, eyes darting to the shadows in every alley. The streets were crowded, though not with the usual morning bustle. People stood in clusters, muttering, watching. Some spat as he passed. Others bowed their heads, though whether in respect or fear he could not tell. When they reached the gates, gold cloaks were lined up in ranks, pikes glinting. Janos Lent waited at the head of them, his round face split by a smile that did not touch his eyes. "Lord Stark," he said with mock warmth, "the Queen is expecting you. Your men will wait outside." "They stay with me," Ned said, his voice even. "Her Grace was most insistent," Slent replied. "Only lords and council members within." Jory shifted in his saddle, hand resting on his sword hilt. Ned gave him a small shake of the head. "Hold the gate. If I don't return by midday, you know what to do." Jory's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Ned dismounted, his boots striking the cobbles, and followed Slent into the keep. The council chamber was already half full. Cersei sat at the head of the table, dressed in green velvet, her golden hair coiled like a crown. Joffrey was beside her, shoulders squared, jaw set in an imitation of Robert's old defiance. Around them sat the usual faces: Pycelle with his heavy chains, Littlefinger with his fox's smile, very serene as ever. Renly was absent, and Stannis, of course, had not yet answered any summons. As Ned entered, all eyes turned to him. He felt the weight of their stares, but ignored it, moving to stand opposite Cersei. "We are here," Cersei began, "because the realm stands leaderless. The throne," her lips tightened, "is gone, but the realm remains, and it requires a strong hand to guide it through these dangerous times." Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Pycelle stroked his beard. "A protector of the realm," he said solemnly. "Yes, yes. It has been done before in times of instability. And who would you name?" Littlefinger asked lightly, though Ned could hear the bait in the question. Cersei's eyes flicked to Joffrey. "My son is Robert's heir by law and by blood, but until he comes of age, he requires a protector, one who will ensure his safety and the safety of the realm." Ned's mouth was dry. "Your son is not Robert's heir." The words landed like a slap. Pycelle sputtered. Littlefinger's brows arched in mock surprise. Joffrey's face flushed crimson. Cersei, to her credit, did not flinch. "And what evidence do you offer for such a treasonous claim?" "The truth," Ned said. "Your children were fathered by your brother, not the king. Robert knew nothing of it." Gasps and low curses broke out. Joffrey half rose, his hand flying to the hilt of his dagger. But Cersei's arm shot out and held him down. Her voice was icy calm. "You admit to destroying the throne, and now you slander the crown prince before the small council. Do you wish to be hanged twice in 1 week, Stark?" "I wish for the realm to be ruled by law, not lies," Ned said. "We must send for Stannis Baratheon. By rights, he is now the king." "Stannis?" Littlefinger's laugh was soft, but sharp. "The man would sooner burn the city than share it. You'd hand the realm to a zealot with no friends?" "Better a lawful zealot than a bastard on the throne," Ned said. Cersei's voice dropped, but the venom in it could have stripped paint from the walls. "Careful, Stark. Bastards have a way of outliving men who call them so." Before Ned could answer, the chamber doors burst open. A gold cloak captain strode in, helmet under his arm. He bowed quickly to Cersei. "Your Grace, the crowd grows restless outside the keep. They call for the boy king to speak to them again." Cersei's lips curved. "Then he shall." She rose, gesturing for Joffrey to follow. "This council will reconvene when the people have heard their king's voice, and when they see who stands beside him." As they swept out, Ned turned to Varys. "You see what she means to do. She will crown him without consent, without law." Varys's expression was unreadable. "She will crown him with the hearts of the people, which often outweigh law in this city." Littlefinger leaned in, voice low. "You've burned the throne, Stark, but you left the stage, and the play goes on." Ned left the chamber, his mind racing. Outside, the courtyard was filling. Joffrey stood on the same cart as the night before, gold cloak officers flanking him, his boyish voice amplified by the hush of the crowd. "Lords and ladies, small folk of King's Landing," Joffrey called. "You have no throne, but you still have a king. I will lead you, protect you, and punish those who bring fire and chaos to our city." The crowd roared. Ned's stomach sank beside him. Littlefinger murmured, "Protector of the realm?" "My dear Stark, the boy just named himself king. What protection could you offer him now?" Ned knew then that the fire he had set in the throne room had spread beyond stone and iron. It was in the streets, in the hearts of men, and it could not be doused with truth alone. The cheering rolled through the courtyard like a breaking wave, then spilled into the streets and kept moving. It was not pure joy. It was noise made of fear and hunger, and the sudden relief of choosing a strong voice to shout with. Joffrey raised his hand and promised bread from the royal stores, double pay for the watch, and harsh justice for traitors who would burn the very heart of the realm. Each promise was a stone in a wall he was building around himself. Each cheer was mortar. Ned watched the wall go up and knew he was on the wrong side of it. By noon, the cart was gone and the orders began. Janos Slint posted squads at every gate and at all bridges. The gold cloaks moved like a river of yellow through the markets, breaking up knots of men who argued too loudly, hauling off anyone who spoke the name Stannis with hope in his voice. A clever rumor started in the fish market and surfaced an hour later in the Silk Street. The North had brought wildfire to burn the throne, that old king's killer's green hell, and meant to burn the city next. A baker swore he'd seen a northern boy with a torch. A washerwoman swore she'd heard wolves howling in the red heap itself. Lies don't need legs if they have a good wind, and the city had plenty of wind. Ned returned to the Tower of the Hand with his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. Jory met him at the door with grim eyes. "The watch searched 2 of our supply wagons at the Queen's order. They say it's to keep food fair, but they let Lannister carts pass without a glance." He hesitated. "And there was a hawker below calling you Lord Ashes." The small folk laughed. "Let them," Ned said, though it stung more than he wanted to admit. "Where are the girls?" "In their rooms," Jory said. "Lady Sansa cries, and will not eat. Arya wants to fight the whole city with a stick." Ned went to them first. He found Sansa sitting on the bed with her hands folded in her lap, face pale, braid perfect, eyes red. A tray of food sat untouched on the table. When she saw him, hope rushed up behind her eyes like water behind a dam. "Father," she said, voice trembling, "the Queen says Joffrey will be crowned in the great sept. There will be songs. I want to go. I want to show the people we are not their enemies." Ned knelt and took her cold hand. "There may be a crowning, but there will be no throne. Songs cannot cover that truth, and the people may cheer a boy today and cut him tomorrow. This city turns quickly." She pulled her hand back, hurt. "You burned it. You took away everything fine and bright. Why couldn't you leave the stories alone?" "Because the stories were killing us," he said gently. "They were killing you, though you could not see it." Sansa looked away, and the dam broke. Tears came in a silent flood. Ned kissed her hair and rose. Arya was in the next room, barefoot, hair wild, a wooden practice sword in her hands, and bruises on her shins. She swung at the air as if the air had insulted her. When she spotted him, she lowered the stick, but did not bow or curtsy. "They're saying it was us," she said. "They're saying we burned the chair, and now we want to burn them. I told a boy in the corridor to say it to my face, and he ran." "That was wise," Ned said, and surprised himself by meaning it. "There are times to swing and times to stand. Today we stand." "I hate standing," she muttered. "I know." He softened his voice. "Pack, little one. Just clothes you can run in and boots that won't blister. We may have to move fast. Are we going home?" "We're going somewhere safer than this." When he returned to the hall, Jory had the men gathered with spears and shields stacked, packs half filled. The air thrummed with a low, steady noise of men waiting for orders they suspected they would not like. Ned told them the truth. "We will try to leave by river at dusk. We'll go quiet, with no banners. We don't strike unless struck. We don't boast, we don't bargain, and we don't drink until we taste Winterfell's snow in our cups." There were grim smiles at that, and a few soft snorts. The humor was thin, but it was a bridge over fear. Before they could move, the door opened and a single Kingsguard stepped in. Barristan Selmy, all in white, his cloak ash-marked at the hem. He removed his helm and stood as straight as a pike. "Lord Stark," he said, "Her Grace demands you surrender your seal and titles. She declares you unfit for treason against the crown and arson against the realm." Jory's hand went to his sword. Half the room moved with him. Barristan did not flinch. "Put them down," Ned said sharply, and the room froze. He walked to the old knight until they were arm's length apart. "You know there is no throne to serve. There is only the law. Stannis is heir." Barristan's weathered face did something. "Complicated and sad? I know the law," he said. "I also know the city will collapse if the Watch fights the Hand in the streets. I came hoping you would choose peace." "Peace is not surrender," Ned said. "Sometimes it is," Barristan said. He lowered his voice. "Go to the Sept at dusk. Speak to the High Septon before the Queen does. If he names a protector by the god's voice, it might cool the streets. I will clear a path for you at the King's Gate. I cannot do more." Ned searched his eyes and found clean steel there. No trick, no trap. "Why help me?" "Because I have served too many men who mistook fear for order," Barristan said. "And because I saw a young girl cry in a corridor today and thought of all the children this city eats." He glanced at Jory. "Do not bring a war band 2 guards, a plain cloak. Dusk. When he was gone, Jory spoke first. A trap. Maybe, Ned said. But we cannot sit here while they name a boy king in the street and a butcher runs the gates. The sept still holds weight with small folk. If the gods speak for calm, even Slint may think twice. Littlefinger sent a note, Van Poole said from the doorway, as if conjured. The steward's hands shook. He says he can provide coin and a ship if we choose the clever road instead of the honorable grave. He asked me to whisper that in your ear. My lord. Ned almost laughed, a sound with no humor in it. He would. Tell him this. Clever roads lead to clever cliffs. We will not sail under his flag. Vean swallowed and nodded, relieved to be rid of the message. By late afternoon, the city had turned the dull color of old bronze. Smoke still threaded the sky, thin and stubborn. Somewhere a bell rang for a wedding or a funeral, no one could tell. Ned took off his Stark pin and tucked it into his belt. He wore a plain brown cloak. Jory and Tomard followed in drab wool, swords hidden. Arya and Sansa waited with Septa Mordane and 4 Northmen for the signal to move to the river. Ned looked at his daughters, committing their faces to memory as if the world would erase them if he blinked. The path to the King's Gate should have been short. It was not. 3 times they had to turn down narrow alleys to avoid a line of gold cloaks or a cart of shouting men, waving crude painted boards' crowns with flames drawn through them, wolves with red eyes. At one corner, a group of boys had tied a dog to a post and were daring each other to touch its teeth. The dog's eyes were wild. It didn't snarl. It just shook, rope cutting into its neck, tongue lolling dry. Arya would have cut it free. Ned kept walking at the gate. Barristan kept his word. A squad of white cloaks stood with pikes leveled not at Ned, but at a cordon of gold cloaks who looked confused to find themselves on the wrong side of the point. Selmy spoke to Slint's lieutenant in a tone that was almost gentle. The man made a show of spitting and backed away. The gate creaked. Open. The great sept of Baelor rose ahead, like a pale ship in a dirty sea, the domes catching the last light. The square before it was already filling, not with a cheering crowd this time, but with awaiting men with hats in their hands, women with children on their hips, eyes dull from bad sleep. Word travels fastest when it has a prayer's shape. Many had come to see what the gods would say about a city without a throne. Ned stepped onto the square and felt eyes tilt toward him like flowers tracking the sun. Whispers raced. Stark, the burner, the hand, the North Wolf. He kept his head high and climbed the sept steps. 2 silent sisters passed with a bier, the sheet over the body lifting and falling with the breeze, as if the dead still breathed. The great doors stood open. Incense drifted out like a promise of calm. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of beeswax. The High Septon waited near the altar, a moon of a man in cloth of silver, flanked by lesser septons whose faces were already pinched with politics. He lifted his fingers in blessing, rings winking, and Ned went to one knee out of old habit. The words stuck in his throat for a heartbeat, then came, "Your High Holiness," he said, voice low but steady. "For the sake of the realm, name a protector who owes no coin to sellswords, no oath to lies, and no fear to the crowd. Name peace." The High Septon looked down with a face like cream left out in the heat. "And who do you think the gods would choose for such a heavy duty?" he asked, voice mild, eyes sharp as razors hidden in linen. Ned opened his mouth to answer, and the doors of the sept banged, wood on stone, a sound like a judge's hammer. Joffrey's voice floated in, bright, high, pleased. Janos Slint's laugh followed like a dog on a leash. The crowd outside roared, this time not with joy, but with the jangle of metal and fear as gold cloaks pressed them back to make a path. Ned did not turn. He kept his eyes on the Septon and saw the man hesitate, saw some calculation run behind his pupils like ants, saw the choice harden there. The old man lifted his hand. "Rise, Lord Stark," he said, louder now. "The gods do not speak to me of peace today. They speak of order, of order." Ned stood slowly, feeling the city tilt again under his feet, the way a ship lists before a wave hits. He understood then that burning a chair had not ended a game. It had forced the players to move faster. He thought of his girls by the river, of Jory's steady hands, of Barristan's tired honor, of winter coming without banners or drums. He drew a long breath. "Then we will make our own order," he said, so softly only the closest Septons heard, and their eyes went wide as bells rang outside, and the boy king's shadow fell across the threshold. The shadow stretched long across the marble floor, throned by the sinking sun and the boy king who thought himself taller than he was. Joffrey entered the sept flanked by gold cloaks and 2 white-cloaked Kingsguard who looked as though they'd been ordered to guard a lion cub from the wolf crouched inside. Janos Slint followed close, chest puffed like a rooster in spring. High Septon bowed just enough to be polite, not enough to show humility. Joffrey didn't notice the difference. He strode forward, chin high, speaking before he was even halfway to the altar. "My lords, my ladies, and good people of the faith," Joffrey's voice rang off the dome, bright and thin. "The gods have preserved me from treachery and fire. They have preserved our city from those who would see it burn." His gaze found Ned and lingered, not with hatred, but with the cold delight of a boy who had found a way to torment a hound on a chain. "This man," Joffrey went on, "burned the throne that has bound our realm for centuries. He says it was cursed. I say he is cursed with pride, with lies, with treason in his blood." The crowd outside caught the words, repeated them, turned them into a chant that rose like a wind through the open doors. Treason, treason. Ned stood very still, every muscle coiled, and watched the High Septon's hands fold into his sleeves. No rescue would come from that quarter. Joffrey turned back to the altar. "The people have called me king, and I accept their call. But a king must act with the blessing of the gods." He faced the Septon. "Anoint me now as the gods' chosen, and let no man doubt my right." The Septon inclined his head and began the slow, heavy steps toward the boy, his voice droning. The ritual words. Incense thickened the air until Ned's throat felt coated with honey and ash. He glanced at Barristan standing near the pillars, white cloak darkened at the hem from ash and dust. The old knight's eyes met his, and Ned saw the truth there. If the anointing happened, his city would belong to Joffrey before the night was out. Ned's mind raced. If he walked out, the gold cloaks would take him in the square. If he drew, Steal here, the Kingsguard would cut him down before he reached the boy. His only chance was to turn the crowd before the oil touched Joffrey's brow. He stepped forward. "Before the gods anoint a king," he said loudly, "should they not know his true father's name?" The Septon froze mid-step. The words hung in the cool air like frost. Joffrey's face twisted, half rage, half disbelief. "Seize him." The gold cloaks moved, but Barristan's voice cut across the marble like a sword striking stone. "In the Sept? In the sight of the Seven? You'll not spill blood here, not while I breathe." The Kingsguard shifted uneasily. The High Septon's eyes darted from boy to man, weighing danger against dignity. Ned took another step. "You..." "Father was not Robert Baratheon," he said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded. "You are the son of Jaime Lannister and Cersei Lannister, born of incest, and by all the laws of gods and men, you have no right to this crown you claim." Gasps and curses erupted from the edges of the crowd outside. Someone shouted, "It's true. I've seen them." Another voice roared, "Lies from the wolf." The two cries, tangled, became a snarl of noise. Cersei appeared then, sweeping up the aisle in green velvet, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "Every word you speak digs your grave, Stark. Look around. Do you see the North here to save you? Do you see your banners? You stand alone." Ned didn't look at her. He looked at the crowd, at the people pressing toward the doors, their faces shifting between anger, curiosity, and fear. "I stand with the truth," he said, "and truth does not kneel to boys playing king. That did it." The crowd broke into shouts, some for Ned, some for Joffrey, all loud enough to make the great domes echo. Gold cloaks surged forward. Barristan stepped between them and Ned, his sword still sheathed, but his hand resting on the hilt. The High Septon, perhaps fearing the Sept would become a battlefield, raised his arms and thundered for silence. "This is no place for such disputes. The gods will not see their house made into a pit for dogs to fight." He turned to Joffrey. "Your Grace, this anointing must wait until order is restored." Cersei's face went pale with fury. Joffrey looked like he might strike the old man, but Slint whispered something in his ear, and the boy only spat on the marble at Ned's feet. "Then let the gods keep their oil. I'll take my crown without it." He spun on his heel and stalked out, his retinue spilling after him like water through a broken dam. Outside, the crowd roared again, the sound swelling until it seemed the whole city was shouting. Barristan leaned close to Ned. "Go. Now. The streets will not be safe once that noise reaches the gates." Ned nodded and turned toward the side door, the one that led to the narrow alleys behind the Sept. As he stepped into the shadowed passage, he heard Cersei's voice carry across the nave. "Find him before nightfall. I want his head before the moon rises." The alley smelled of fish and old rain. Jory and Tomard were waiting with two rough-coated horses. Ned swung into the saddle, feeling every eye in the city turn toward him, even though he was out of sight. "We ride for the river," he said. "Fast." They wove through side streets, skirting the noise and light of the main ways, but the city was already moving. Faces appeared in windows, children pointed, dogs barked, and ran alongside for a while. More than once they had to turn, back from a street blocked by gold cloaks. At last they reached the quay, where the river ferries bobbed against their moorings. The Northmen had gathered there with Arya and Sansa, cloaked and hooded, ready to board the narrowboat Vayan Pool had hired. The water was black glass in the dusk, the far shore a darker shadow. Ned dismounted and lifted Sansa onto the boat. She clung to him, trembling. Arya climbed in without help, eyes darting to every shadow. Jory stepped aboard last, pushing them away from the dock with a long pole dot as the oars dipped into the water. The city loomed behind them, rooftops like jagged teeth, the red keep a black crown against the dying light. From somewhere deep in the streets came a sudden swell of noise, not quite a cheer, not quite a scream. Ned watched the city recede and thought, I burned the throne, but the fire's still here. It's in them now. The boat slid into the slow current, carrying them toward whatever waited beyond the city walls. The first strokes of the oars were gentle, like a lullaby you don't believe in anymore. The river rocked the boat softly, and for a few breaths it felt as if the city couldn't reach them. Then a horn sounded somewhere upriver, flat and hungry, and the illusion broke. The boatman flinched and bent lower to his work. Jory crouched in the stern with a hand on his sword and an eye on the bank, counting shadows like coin. Arya leaned over the side as if the black water spoke a language she could learn if she listened hard enough. Sansa kept her head down, hands fist tight, in the fabric of her cloak. Behind them the last light clung to the red keep, like a stubborn ghost. Ahead the river turned slow and oily, hugging the city wall before opening toward night. Ned crouched by the girls and tried to make his voice calm. No one speaks above a whisper. If I say down, you lie flat and don't move. If I say run, you run where Jory points you. Is that clear? Arya nodded, fierce and bright-eyed. Sansa nodded, too, but her mouth trembled. The boatman, thin, hollow-cheeked, with the careful hands of a man who likes to live, kept his strokes even. Keep low, he murmured without looking up. Gold cloaks got barges out tonight. Never seen them work past dusk before. Must be a special occasion. We're all tired of special occasions, Jory said. They slid past a cluster of moored grain boats, their sacks mounded like sleeping giants. Voices drifted from one-deck men laughing too hard at something not that funny. Ned watched the shadows, counted lanterns, measured chances he didn't much like. They needed the bend. The small dock past the tanner's yard where a wagon waited with plain canvas and barrels of salted fish. If they reached that dock, they could vanish into the road that led east, and from there to the King's Woods, and quiet paths no one from the city bothered to learn. The first barge appeared as a darker shape inside the dark, a low, squat thing with a square lantern hooded to a slit. It nosed out from the far bank, angling for the middle, slow and sure. The horn sounded again from somewhere behind it, and then a second lantern winked at them from nearer the city side. Jory swore under his breath. Down, Ned whispered. They flattened. The boatman eased his strokes, almost let the current take them, and the river made a quiet, secret sound along the hull. Arya's hand found Ned's sleeve and held on. Sansa pressed her eyes shut, her lashes wet. Ned could feel her shaking through the wood. The first barge slipped by close enough that Ned could see the hunched backs of rowers, the gleam of spearheads stacked like a hedgehog's spines, the pale wedge of Janos Slint's lieutenant's face beneath the lantern. The man yawned. It made Ned want to laugh soft, frantic laughter at the thought that a man could be bored while hunting a family. He swallowed it. For a breath it seemed they would pass unseen. Then a lantern flared bright on the city bank, and a voice sang. "Out, lazy and curious. Whoa there, show your faces." Another voice followed, sharper. Orders from the commander. Every hull checked. The boatman did not look at Ned. "We keep floating like drift," he breathed. "Maybe they let. Drift alone." But the sharper voice did not sound like it let anything alone. The second barge bumped off its moorings and came, its lantern painting the water in a golden wound. Jory's hand slid to his dagger. Tomard hunched near the bow, braced his boot, and looked back for the smallest nod. Ned shook his head. "Not yet." "Boat there," the sharp voice called again. "Closer now. Pull to, or we put a spear through your planks and fish you like eels." Ned rose halfway, keeping his head below the gunwale, and lifted both hands. "Fishmonger," he called back, letting the river rough his voice. "Late delivery up to Salt Market. Perishables, sir. Want the watch to pay for rot?" There was a pause. The boatman's eyes flicked to him, then to the barrels at their feet that were not fish. Arya held her breath so hard her chest didn't move. The barge creaked. Boots thumped. "Names," the voice demanded. "All of you." Ned opened, his mouth to lie, but the river answered first. From upstream came a new sound, oars biting in earnest, quick and a little wild. A small craft shot from the shadow of the grain boats, 2 men pulling as if devils pushed them. The barge pivoted toward that splash of movement as a dog's head turns to a thrown bone. "Hoy, you there too." Spears clattered as men shifted sides. The small craft bolted for the far bank. The barge lunged after it, lantern swinging, horn blaring for friends. In the light, Ned glimpsed the fugitives' faces gaunt, frightened, not his men. One looked back and saw Ned looking, and in that heartbeat, 2 men, trying not to die, knew each other anyway. "Row," Ned breathed to the boatman. "Now." They skimmed along in the newly opened dark like a cockroach when the kitchen girl drops a plate. The shouting slid away behind them. The river bent, merciful and black. Jory laughed once, low and amazed. "The stranger sends us cover." "The stranger sends a bill after," the boatman muttered. When his arms were steady and the boat ate water, they reached the tanner's yard dock with their hearts in their mouths. The smell hit first rotten bark, old hides, the sour bite of lime. "Gods," Sansa whispered, pressing sleeve to nose. "It smells like something dead inside a boot." "Good," Arya said, too loud until Jory shushed her. "No one will look for ladies where it stinks." 2 Northmen stepped from the gloom under the shed roof, faces smeared with ash. Hal and Will, both quick on their feet, both the kind of men who could become trees when they stood still. The wagon waited, plain as promised, 1 old horse hitched, the bed already half filled with barrels and burlap. Hal kept watch on the lane. "We'll help the girls up into straw and canvas that scratched and didn't ask questions." Ned clasped the boatman's shoulder. "Your name," he said. "No names on nights like this," the man replied. "But if you get where you're going, light a candle somewhere no one expects. If I see it, I'll know a full idea paid." Ned nodded. He wanted to press coin into the man's hand, but kindness was a torch, and torches drew eyes. He settled for a grip that said what words could not. The man pushed off, mouth a thin line, and vanished back into the river. They rolled out slow, the wagon creaking, straw hiding stark faces and stark steel. Jory walked beside the wheel with Tomard on the other side, both with staffs like any hired drovers' guards. The tanner's lane emptied into a narrow road between low warehouses with shuttered windows and doors, swollen shut from old floods. Twice they passed knots of men counting coins under lanterns, but no one looked twice at a stink wagon bound for the east road. Only when the city wall fell behind and fields took the place of alleys did Ned let himself breathe all the way down. The stars came out as if they had been hiding from the city and now dared to peep. Crickets sang. A fox ran across the road and paused, yellow eyes bright in the lantern, before it slipped into wheat. The river glimmered to their right like a blade on a shelf. Sansa's breathing slowed. Arya wriggled in the straw and whispered, "We made it." "Not yet," Ned murmured. "The road has ears, too. And friends who were brave in the city grow braver in the dark." They pushed on until the horse's breath rasped and the wagon's axle complained in a steady whine. Jory called a halt in a copse of willows where the road bent close to the river again. "Fire?" Tomard asked, hopeful and tired. "Cold," Ned said. "Bread and cheese. Water. No light. Rotate watch by pairs. If a twig snaps wrong, we're the wind." They ate in the dark, each bite a duty, not a pleasure. Sansa nibbled like a mouse. Arya devoured like a dog that finally stole a kitchen scrap. After, Ned pulled his cloak tight and tried to sleep, but sleep was a shy thing that night. He kept seeing the sept door swing, the septon's eyes like coins, Joffrey's shadow marching across the marble, the river lanterns sliding toward them like predatory fish dot near midnight. Hal touched his shoulder. "Riders," he breathed. Ned was up and moving before the word finished. He heard the sound, then hooves. Not many, but not one or two either. The kind of number that made a man think of scouts sent ahead of a larger pack. Jory and Tomard were already at the road's lip, crouched low, staves set aside for boughs. Ned slid beside them, peered through willow switches, and counted shapes. 5 riders with cloaks that did not match. The lead horse wore a bell tied with cloth to stop its jingle. Clever men, they didn't ride like gold cloaks. They rode like sellswords or river men who'd been paid to be interested. One carried a pole with something dangling. As they drew even, a small gust tugged the cloth aside. A fish painted in red, the old Tully sign, defaced with a crude crown and a smear of tar. Message work. Someone in the city was already naming enemies for the road. The riders slowed. The lead man raised a hand. He turned his head like a wolf catching scent. Arya shifted in the wagon. A bit of canvas whispered. The sound was nothing, but to men who lived by strong ears, nothing was enough. The lead rider's chin lifted. "There," he said. "Smell that? Tanner's wagon. Fresh." Jory's bowstring creaked as he drew. Ned laid a hand over his forearm. "Wait." You stepped out from the willows with his palms empty and open. Jory hissed a protest that died halfway. "Evening," Ned said, voice plain and tired. "We carry hides to the east towns. If you're hungry, I've a heel of bread for a fair word. The riders checked. In Lantern Smear, Ned saw beards, scars, a nose broken, and never set right. The lead man eyed Ned's boots, his posture, the way. His empty hands were empty like a soldier's, not a farmer's. "Hides," he said slowly, "and no stink horse on the lead. You trotting lies on bare feet, friend?" "Bare feet still walk," Ned replied, "and lies don't pull wagons." He managed a small, weary smile. The kind men share on roads when there's too little coin to sharpen words. The man studied him a long moment. The others fanned a little, casual and not casual. The river talked to itself in the dark. Somewhere a night bird called once, twice, then decided to mind its own business. Finally, the leader grunted. "We're hunting a wolf with cubs," he sighed. "Bounty from the city. Gold for the man who brings back skins." He let that hang between them like a spit on a fire. Ned kept his face carved from quiet. "I've seen no wolf," he said. "Only rats," the man spat. "Plenty of those." He nudged his horse forward a step, then paused as if he had thought better of something. "Keep your heads down," he said, not unkindly. "The road's got more teeth than usual." "We'll mind ours," Ned said. They moved on, the five of them, bells still tied silent. Lantern making a little moon pool that drifted away down the road. Jory exhaled a sound like prayer and cursed together. "That wasn't luck," he whispered. "That was you." "That was him deciding he'd rather hunt in another wood," Ned said, "and us deciding to look like trees." They waited until hoofbeats were a memory. Then they rolled the wagon deeper into the willows, reset the watches, and pretended at sleep some more. When dawn finally eased the sky from black to gray, the river showed its face again, honest and cold. Mist lay low on the fields, and the road looked new, as if it had never known shouting or horns. They moved at first light, slower now, careful of ruts. Past the first mile marker, a thing hung from a thorn tree, a wooden crown, charred at the tips, turning slowly on a string. Beneath it someone had scrawled in charcoal, "Nitrogen monoxide, king, but the knife." Arya stared at it, expression hard. Sansa looked away, swallowing. Ned felt the words settle in his bones like bad weather. He had burned a throne to free a realm, and the road answered with this: crowns made of ash and knives for kings. He tightened his cloak and signaled the wagon on. Whatever waited ahead would not love them, but forward was the only direction left by mid-morning. The fields gave way to sparse woods and scattered farmsteads with doors barred and smoke thin from stingy chimneys. A pair of ravens watched from a dead tree as they passed, heads tilting like old men judging a story. Ned thought of Winterfell, of crows on the walls, of the long gray line of the crypts. He thought of Robb of Catelyn's hands, of a cold wind that did not care about gold or banners. "We make the King's Road by noon," Jory said, trying for cheer. "From there, choices? From there," Ned agreed. "And no knights to bless them." He didn't say the rest aloud. "And enemies in every shadow, and winter drawing its clean white sheet over all their foolish fires." He didn't have to. The wagon wheels said it for him, every creak a reminder that the game hadn't ended, only changed boards. And somewhere behind them, in a city that smelled of smoke and hope and fear, a boy without oil on his brow called himself king, and men learned how easy it was to cheer. The mist clung low as they reached the King's Road, curling around the wagon. Wheels like ghost fingers. The horse's breath puffed white in the chill, though the sun was climbing. Ned could see the faint line of the road stretching north and south, a promise and a threat both. North meant home, but also every mile of contested ground between here and the neck. South meant avoiding Lannister nets, but deeper into lands where gold could buy more swords than honor could hold back. He had been turning those paths over in his mind for hours when the first sign of trouble came. A pair of riders on the northern rise, not moving, just watching. They sat their mounts like men used to waiting, which made Ned uneasy. Jory shaded his eyes. Mailed shirts, spears, one's got the Lannister red on his cloak lining. "They've seen us," Ned said. "We can't outrun fresh horses with this wagon. Keep moving slow. If they come down, we stand." The riders didn't come down. Not yet. They turned and disappeared behind the rise. That was worse. By midday, the road bent into a shallow valley between scrubby hills. It was the perfect place for an ambush, and Ned's skin prickled the moment. The wagon rolled into the shadow of the slope. A shout came from the ridge high sharp, the kind men use when they're not asking. Then they came. First from the front, 4 riders with spears leveled, fanning to block the road. Then from behind, the 2 watchers returned with another pair at their heels. All wore mismatched armor, but the way they moved together said they were no rabble. Lead man was broad, his helm pushed back to show a face flattened like a hammer's head. "Lord Stark," he said, making the title sound like a jest. "Her Grace in King's Landing sends her regards, and her demand. You come with us." "And my daughters?" Ned asked. "They'll ride in the wagon, back to their betrothed king." The man smiled like a butcher picking out the day's cuts. "Safe as gold in a Lannister vault." Jory's staff hit the ground, point down. "Not happening." The man's eyes went cold. "It happens, or this road drinks deep." Ned stepped down from the wagon. "You can take me," he said. "Leave. The girls and my men. That's the only bargain I'll make." "That's no bargain," the man said. "That's a prayer, and I don't pray." The first spear came up a fraction too high. Jory's hand flashed, the hidden sword clearing straw and steel in the same breath. Tomard was already moving, his staff snapping up to catch another spear and twist it hard enough to unseat the rider. The air filled with the clang and grunt of men in close quarters. Ned drew ice. The great blade's weight was an old friend, and it sang through the morning air as if glad to be awake. The broad-faced man blocked, but the shock of the impact drove him back in the saddle. Ned pressed forward, each swing opening space between the wagon and the press of horseflesh. Arya was gone from the wagon in a blink, rolling under its bed and coming up with a jagged bit of wood in her hand. Sansa stayed crouched under the canvas, hands over her ears, eyes squeezed shut. 2 riders tried to circle to come at the wagon's unguarded side, but Hal and Will were there, Hal jabbing up with a pike that took a man in the thigh, Will swinging a short sword that caught the other across the forearm. The fight was short and vicious. 1 man down, 2 more reeling, the rest suddenly weighing coin against blood. The broad-faced leader spat, wheeled his horse, and shouted for a retreat. They pulled back up the slope, their curses fading into distance. Ned didn't trust the quiet that followed. He scanned the ridges, listened for the thud of returning hooves. "Nothing yet. Mount," he told Jory. We take the East Fork before they find friends. Hard riding, no stops. The wagon jolted onto the rougher track, the horse stretching into a pace that rattled teeth and bones. They didn't slow until the sun was a coin just above the horizon, and the land around them was strange low hills, broken stone walls, the skeleton of an old holdfast long since given to grass and birds. Here, at last, they stopped. The horse blew hard, sweat darkening its hide. The girls climbed down, stiff-legged. Arya's eyes still danced with the leftover wild of the fight. Sansa moved like she might break if someone breathed too hard near her. They camped in the shadow of the holdfast wall, cold supper, and no fire. The men spoke little. Ned walked the perimeter until the stars came out, his mind running every road ahead. He knew then what he had always known, deep down since the moment the first spark touched. The throne, there was no path home without more blood. The realm would not let him go quietly, not with the story of the Iron Thrones burning still hot in every mouth. But he also knew something else, something that had been buried under duty and honor and all the ways a Stark is supposed to think. He could not regret it. The throne had been a sickness, and he had cut it out. The wound would bleed for a long time, but better that than the poison. He looked at his daughters sleeping under their cloaks, the rise and fall of their breathing steady. He thought of Robb holding Winterfell, of Catelyn's hands folded in, the God's Wood of the white silence of winter rolling south. When he finally lay down, ice beside him, the sky was very clear. The stars looked cold and close, like the eyes of the old gods watching from beyond the wall. He did not ask them for victory, only for the strength to see the next day, and the day after that, until the game burned itself out or froze in its own shadow. Somewhere far to the south, Joffrey Baratheon wore a crown that no oil had touched. Somewhere Cersei Lannister sharpened her smile. Somewhere the gold cloaks hunted the road with orders and coin. And somewhere, in the black heart of the realm, the place where iron had once ruled from its cruel seat, there was only ash, and the echo of a fire that had changed everything.